Hi, Roy here. Roy reads anything, and I'm going to talk about Sexton Blake, a detective character who has been a household name here in the UK. Less so now, but there are thousands of stories written about him. He had films, television, comics, all sorts of things. There's even a rhyming slang term. Sexton Blake, fake. So if anyone says something might be a Sexton Blake, that's what they mean. I'm going to say 10 things, 10 reasons I think Sexton Blake is a great character, perhaps even the greatest of the Baker Street detectives. So, number one, longevity. So, Sexton Blake, created in 1893, and here's one of his fairly early stories from early in the 20th century when he was in a one penny story paper. Very, very tiny type, but you get a whole novel in these papers. This one is Sexton Blake, Bookmaker. So going an immensely long time. Is that going to work? Up to a point. Okay, so yeah, but still alive. So here's a recent book, one of 5 anthologies of Sexton Blake stories, which include interviews with the man himself introducing the book and stories. So that's the most recent Blake text there are. And he's never been rebooted. Nobody's ever said, "Oh, now we say he was born in 1980 or whatever." He's still like literally the same guy for some reason that has yet to be explained. So longevity is one thing. Two, he is and isn't like Sherlock Holmes. So yes, he lives in Baker Street. He is a detective, a genius detective, known the country over, used by the police who would defer to him in all sorts of things. And he smokes pipes, cigars, cigarettes, pretty much everything. And he sometimes might be found wearing a long dressing gown with acid burns in it, and from his experiments he does in his Baker Street apartments. On the other hand, he's much more a man of action than Holmes. Whereas Sherlock Holmes would get Dr. Watson to bring his pistol along, Blake, he does have an assistant, a young chap called Tinker, but Blake would bring his own gun and probably sock a few people on the jaw as well. The stories are often headlong adventures with rescues, captivity, escapes, all that kind of thing, as well as detection. So a sort of Holmes and yet not Holmes. Number three, I love Sexton Blake because of the period of the 1920s when he basically fought supervillains. So his adversaries included characters like Zenith the Albino, who would wear evening dress at all times, smoke opium cigarettes, and generally be a sort of genius decadent character. Waldo the Wonder Man, a super strong character. Um, Leon Kestrel, the Master Mummer, Master of Disguise. All of those fantastic. But number four, also amongst the villains, a load of femme fatales like Madame Yvonne Cartier, for instance, and Marie Gallant. Um, Now, Blake, despite being obviously red-blooded male, he never goes full romance, but he can be quite chivalrous towards characters like that. And some of those femme fatale, although they were doing bad things, they were sometimes to right a worse wrong, like robbing money to get it back from even worse baddies, and maybe it's an inheritance that's been stolen from their family or something. Miss Death, or to give her a full name, the mysterious Miss Death, a Yorkshire lass diagnosed with 6 months to live, decides to become a master criminal, wearing a skull mask to do her criminal activities. Now, people I've seen many of the great works of art of the world, famous paintings, operas, plays, but a scratchy old drawing of a woman with a skull head pointing a pistol, to me, and I'm not joking, it would makes my heart soar to the same extent as great works of art. So, moving on. Um, there was also a quiet period, which I'm quite keen on as well. So, after the excitement of the supervillains, for some reason, in the 40s and 50s, the stories were much smaller scale. You know, here he is dealing with the council swindle, bit of local authority action there. The Spivs mistake. Um, yeah, here's one about a racehorse. So it's almost like to give readers a reassuring type of story. They you got these smaller scale, tamer things, which I like them as well. Then you get the New Order in the 60s, late 50s into the 60s. The stories get a lot racier, and they're sort of competing with American pulps, I suppose. Um, you Yeah, here's one. The Espresso Jungle. He's battling beatniks. In an espresso cellar club in Soho, the Beat Generation hoodlums plan violence and terror. So you get these kind of more sort of that's never going to work, is it? Um, you get these kind of updated stories. So I guess another great thing about Blake is he's reinvented, and yet he's always the same. He doesn't really move with the times. The crimes he has to solve and the settings he's in do. Yeah, the television murders, so up to date stuff there. The book's changed format into paperbacks. So here we have Death in the Top 20, and again with the beatniks, Dead Respectable, Chelsea, Beats and Debs in clubs and pubs. And I just had to at least partially attempt to cosplay violent beatnik of this novel, which was really good. So that was a great period as well. Another thing I love about Blake is he has a whole world around him. He has supporting characters. He has his offices, which do move. I think he still lives in Baker Street, but he's opens a more professional operation in Berkeley Square. So there's almost a Blake universe with some supporting characters who also seem to be immortal to all intents and purposes. Eighth thing I like is that these are firmly in the trash layer. They're not highbrow. They're ephemeral. They're rapidly written. There's tons of them. They're literally pulp. Of all the millions of pages, well, maybe it's not millions, but all of the hundreds of thousands of pages about Blake, they are often literally pulp, and originally referred to as the office boys Sherlock Holmes. They're pitched at this low level, which means when they're excellent, they're better than they need to be, if you see what I mean. So to me, I love him as being like the people's character. I also love the authors. Won't go into massive detail, but whenever I read anything biographical about the authors, they always seem to be these raffish, colourful Fleet Street characters, almost more interesting than the stories they wrote. And final point, number 10, it's the quality of the stories. I've read dozens of them, always found them solidly entertaining and enjoyable, but they can be amazing. So this one, for instance, The Season of the Skylark by Jack Trevor Story, amazing writer, is it's got that kind of unfolding fate sense about it that you get in a Patricia Highsmith or a Georges Simenon crime book. It's got a genuinely creepy group of criminals who are like a pseudo family operating under the guise of an end of the pier of Enter the Peer Entertainers. It's set in my hometown. Bonus for that. So yeah, you could find just genius things like this. Um, is this reprinted anywhere? Is it online? Nope, it's just on this decaying 64 pages of pulp paper steadily rotting away in my collection, with the rust from the staples probably going to eventually sort of destroy the whole thing. So I love it for that as well. So Blake, can you say, is he the best of the Baker Street detectives? Certainly the longest living, and has the most stories about him. You kind of ultimately have to defer to Sherlock Holmes as the character who brought together loads of tropes that make up detective fiction, but I've still got a massive soft spot for Sexton Blake. If you want to read any, there are 5 anthologies currently in print, edited by Mark Hodder, that go through different eras of Blake's career. So that's probably as good a place as any to start. But things like this, you can get them for just a few pounds on eBay if you're into the more sort of, if you want to smell the paper, read the adverts, see an actual photograph of Sexton Blake's secretary. These are always a good bet. Right, going to shut up now. So, thank you for watching. That's me talking about Sexton Blake. In the future, I will talk about other things. You might want to subscribe. You might want to like this video or leave a comment. It's up to you. So I will now say goodbye.